Welcome back for another deep dive. This time we're going to be tackling a question that I think has fascinated thinkers for centuries. How did humans develop the capacity for language? And, you sent over some excerpts, and I got to say they really get to the heart of it. Darwin's observations about human evolution, uh, insights from cognitive science, and even this fascinating paper that you sent over that explores the structure of the brain itself.
It's really a rich tapestry of sources, and it's so intriguing to me how they all kind of converge on this idea that language isn't, just some kind of cultural add-on. It's like deeply intertwined with our biology, with, the very structure of our brains.
Yeah, and going through these, one that really jumped out at me was that essay on brain structure. I mean, it really delves into how the human brain has evolved and, how certain areas seem to be specialized for language processing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it points out, compared to other primates, our brains have, undergone some pretty significant rewiring, particularly in the regions that are associated with, language comprehension and production. Like, evolution decided to dedicate some prime real estate to the faculty of language in our neural architecture.
And it makes you wonder, like, what was the evolutionary pressure that led to that specialization? What advantage did language offer our ancestors that made it such a valuable trait to, pass down through generations?
Yeah, that's the big question. Well, that's where Darwin's work comes in, even though he was writing, way before we had the tools to study the brain in detail, right? But his observations in The Descent of Man about, the struggle for existence and the power of natural selection, it gives us a framework, right, for understanding how any trait, including language, could become dominant in a species.
Right. Survival of the fittest. But here's the thing, right? Darwin was puzzled by, this thing that humans often act in ways that seem to defy this whole principle of self-preservation, right? I mean, we cooperate. We help others. We even sacrifice ourselves for the good of the group.
That's it. That's the key. Maybe language evolved not just to help individuals survive, like in a hostile environment, but to help, groups thrive, right? Think about it. Coordinating hunts, sharing knowledge about food sources, warning each other about danger. I mean, all of these require sophisticated communication.
So language might have given those early human groups a collaborative edge, allowing them to, like, outcompete rivals who are stuck with, just grunts and just like the original social network, right? Helping our ancestors build stronger, more resilient communities.
Exactly, precisely. And that's where that social brain hypothesis comes in. It argues that as our ancestors started living in larger, more complex social groups, the demands on their brains, they just increased exponentially.
Okay, so unpack that a little bit for me. The bigger the group, the more relationships to keep track of, the more information to process, the more potential for, both conflict and cooperation. All of this requires serious mental bandwidth.
Exactly. That's it. And the social brain hypothesis suggests that this pressure to navigate these like complex social landscapes was a major driving force in the evolution of our brains, particularly those areas that are involved in language.
So language isn't just a way for us to express, like our individual thoughts and needs. It's a tool for building and maintaining the intricate web of social connections that define us as a species. It's almost like language is the glue that holds human societies together.
Yeah, it's a powerful analogy. And this brings us back to that paper on brain structure. It highlights how certain areas of the human brain, particularly in the frontal and temporal lobes, seem to be specialized for processing the complex syntax and semantics of language.
It's like evolution took those areas of the brain that were already good at, things like planning, sequencing, and social cognition and said, hey, let's just tweak these a little bit and create a system for generating and understanding complex language.
Yeah, and the fact that these language areas are predominantly located in the left hemisphere of the brain, that's another clue, right? The left hemisphere is also associated with fine motor control, which is, essential for things like tool making.
So we're seeing a connection there, right?
Yeah.
The same neural circuitry that evolved for, manipulating tools could have been, like, co-opted for manipulating words and grammatical structures.
It's a fascinating possibility, and it suggests that, the evolution of language wasn't just about like growing a bigger brain overall. It was about rewiring specific circuits, repurposing existing neural pathways, and creating these new connections that allowed for this remarkable capacity for symbolic communication.
It is incredible to think that our brains have this, like, built-in machinery for language that's been shaped by millions of years of evolution. It's almost like we're born with a language instinct, right? A predisposition to communicate in this uniquely human way.
Yeah, and that instinct, that drive to connect and communicate, it's deeply rooted in our evolutionary past. Like those early human groups, they found strength and survival in the power of shared language.
This has me thinking, though. If language is so deeply ingrained in our brains, what does that mean for other species? Particularly, like our closest primate relatives.
Right.
Could they have something akin to language, even if it's not, as complex as ours?
That is a question that has intrigued researchers for decades. And while we haven't, found evidence of full-blown language in other primates, there are some tantalizing hints that they possess some of the building blocks. Chimpanzees, for example, they can learn, hundreds of signs, and they can even combine them in these like simple sequences, but they never quite seem to grasp the intricate rules of grammar, the ones that allow us as humans to create these infinite meaningful combinations of words.
It's like they have the vocabulary, but not the syntax. The words, but not the sentence structure. Which
Yeah.
makes you wonder, what was that key innovation, like the evolutionary leap that allowed our ancestors to cross that linguistic chasm?
Well, one theory is that the development of a specialized brain region, one that processes hierarchical structures, crucial for both language and tool making, might have played a key role.
So the same neural mechanisms that allow us to, understand the relationship between like a hammer and a nail or, the steps involved in building a fire, those same mechanisms might have been repurposed for understanding the relationships between words in a sentence.
Exactly. Right. And this ability to like perceive and manipulate these hierarchical structures, it might have been like a prerequisite for the emergence of, this complex grammar. It's like our brains needed that scaffolding, that underlying framework before they could build the intricate edifice of language.
It's fascinating to think that the seeds of language might have been sown in these seemingly unrelated activities like tool making or problem solving. It's like our brains were gradually developing these cognitive tools, needed for language.
Yeah.
Without even knowing what language was yet.
And this brings us back to that paper on brain structure. It highlights the importance of a region called Broca's area, which is located in the frontal lobe of the left hemisphere. And this area has, it's long been associated with speech production, but recent research suggests that it might also, play a role in processing these hierarchical structures.
So Broca's area isn't just about like stringing words together.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the underlying relationships between those words, right? The grammatical rules that govern how they can be combined to create meaning.
Exactly. And damage to Broca's area, can lead to a condition called Broca's aphasia, where people, have difficulty producing fluent speech. Often they're speaking in these short telegraphic phrases, right? But their comprehension of language can remain relatively intact.
It's like their brains, they know what they want to say, but they can't quite get the words out in the right order,
Mhm.
which highlights just how intricate and specialized that neural circuitry for language production really is.
Yeah, and it's not just Broca's area, right? The paper also mentions Wernicke's area,
Mhm.
located in the temporal lobe, which plays this, crucial role in language comprehension. And together, these two areas, they form this dynamic duo, right? Working in concert to allow us to both understand and produce language.
It's like this two-way communication system,
Yeah.
Wernicke's area is like decoding the incoming messages, and Broca's area is encoding the outgoing ones. And any disruption to this system, whether it's due to brain damage or developmental abnormalities, it can have a profound impact on language abilities.
Absolutely. It's a testament to both the fragility and the resilience of the human brain, how this incredibly complex system can be both vulnerable to disruption and capable of remarkable adaptation.
This brings me to a point that's been kind of like simmering in my mind throughout this whole deep dive. We've been talking about these specific brain regions, but is it really that simple? Is language just a matter of like flipping switches in certain parts of the brain?
Not at all. While identifying these key areas has been crucial for understanding how language works, it's important to remember that the brain, it doesn't operate in isolation, right? It's this vast interconnected network. And language processing involves, multiple regions working together in this symphony of neural activity.
So it's not just about which areas are active, but how they communicate with each other, like the timing and the coordination of those neural signals.
Precisely. And that's where techniques like fMRI, which allow us to see brain activity in real time, they've been
Yeah.
so revolutionary. They've revealed that, language processing is this dynamic dance
Yeah.
involving this complex interplay of regions across the brain.
This makes me wonder, what about those theories that suggest, that language might have evolved from gestures? Could our brains have repurposed, neural pathways that were originally used for controlling hand movements to create the circuits for language?
It's a fascinating idea. And there is some evidence to support it. For example, even people who are born blind gesture while they speak, right? Suggesting this deep innate connection between movement and language.
And the fact that sign languages share many structural similarities with spoken languages, like, grammar and syntax.
Yeah.
It hints at this common underlying cognitive framework, right?
Exactly. It's as if our brains have this inherent capacity for language, whether it's expressed through vocalizations or hand movements. And this suggests that, the evolution of language wasn't just about developing, the physical apparatus for speech, but about rewiring the brain itself to create a system for symbolic communication.
So even if our ancestors started out communicating with grunts and gestures, their brains were already laying the groundwork for the emergence of, something far more complex and powerful, language as we know it.
And that, my friend, is the beauty of evolution. It's a process of tinkering, of repurposing existing structures, of, building upon what came before to create something new and extraordinary.
It's like evolution took these disparate elements, tool making, social intelligence, gesture, and wove them together into this intricate tapestry that we call language.
And that tapestry, it continues to evolve, to adapt, to reflect the ever-changing needs and experiences of our species, right? Language is this living, breathing entity shaped by both our biology and our culture.
This makes me wonder, how does the environment that we grow up in, the languages that we're exposed to, affect the development of those language areas in our brains? Is there a critical period for language acquisition, a window of opportunity when our brains are most receptive to learning new languages?
It's a question that has, fascinated developmental psychologists for decades. And while the answer is incomplex, there's certainly evidence that early childhood is this crucial time for language development, The more language a child is exposed to in those early years, the stronger those neural connections in the language areas of the brain become.
It's like those pathways are being paved, smoothed out and strengthened by this constant flow of language input. And the earlier that process starts, the more robust those pathways become.
Exactly. And this highlights the importance of creating, rich language environments for children, exposing them to a variety of, words, sounds, and grammatical structures. It's like giving their brains the raw materials that they need to build a strong and flexible linguistic foundation.
This is all so fascinating, but I keep thinking back to those brain regions that light up when we use language. I mean, we've been laser focused on that. What about the connections between those regions? I think that essay you sent over about brain structure mentioned something called disconnection syndromes. What are those exactly?
Oh, yeah, those are fascinating. They really show just how important those neural pathways are for language. Imagine, a pathway between Broca's area, which we know is for speech production, and Wernicke's area, which handles comprehension. Imagine if that pathway was disrupted.
Oh, so the areas themselves could be fine. But if that communication line between them is down, I mean, that would really cause some problems.
Yeah, exactly. It's think about conduction aphasia. That's where someone can understand what you're saying,
Yeah.
and they can speak fluently, but they have trouble repeating phrases, The message gets to Wernicke's area just fine, but it can't get relayed to Broca's area.
Oh, wow. So it's like the words are getting stuck in traffic between those two regions? That's wild.
Right. And these disconnection syndromes are like windows into that intricate wiring. By studying them, we can really map out these neural pathways, and then we can understand how these different brain regions work together to create this seamless flow of communication that we, often take for granted.
It really makes you think. Does this interconnectedness, this flow of information between all these different parts of the brain, does that play a role in things like creativity or problem solving?
Oh, absolutely. Language isn't just a tool for communication, It's a tool for thought. The way we structure our language, the metaphors that we use, the stories that we tell, they all shape the way we think, the way we perceive the world.
Right. It's like language gives us the building blocks for, constructing these mental models of reality, for making sense of the chaos. And then by manipulating those building blocks, by playing with language, we can come up with new ideas, new solutions, new ways of seeing things.
Yeah. Exactly. And this ability to think symbolically, to manipulate abstract concepts through language, that's what sets us apart. It's what allowed us to develop complex cultures, to build civilizations, to create, art, science, literature, all of that.
So language isn't just a byproduct of our intelligence. It's a driving force in our evolution. It's what allowed us to transcend these limitations of our physical bodies and create worlds within our minds.
Beautifully put. And it all comes back to this remarkable organ, the human brain, this 3-pound universe inside our skulls, shaped by millions of years of evolution to give us this capacity for language, this, extraordinary tool that connects us, defines us, and empowers us.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I can't help but feel like this sense of awe at how complex and just wonderful it all is. We've gone from Darwin's observations on natural selection to the intricate neural maps of the human brain, and we've only just scratched the surface.
I know. And that's the exciting part, right? There's still so much more to discover, so many mysteries, yet to be unraveled. This whole study of language and the brain, it's an ongoing adventure. And every new discovery brings us closer to understanding this remarkable ability that makes us human.
And for you, dear listener, I hope this deep dive has sparked a sense of, curiosity and a desire to explore further, to dive into those sources that you provided and uncover your own insights. Because this whole evolution of language, it isn't just, some academic exercise. It's a story that's still being written, a story that each of us contributes to every time we speak, write, or even just think. So keep those conversations flowing, those thoughts swirling, and those questions unanswered, because that's what makes the deep dive so rewarding.